Hi patrons, Matt Easton here of course, and I've just done a video earlier this evening actually where I was talking about the Gladius as a sword, and this is a type of sword that I've not really covered very much on my channel because I haven't owned one, quite simply, and you know I like to show things on screen when I'm talking about them, and I do understand that I could have just shown lots of pictures, and in fact I might start to look at classical world, ancient world weapons a little bit more because they're quite neglected on my channel, given that I've looked at a fairly broad spectrum of arms and armour. I've neglected the ancient world to quite a large extent. Now, you may know I've mentioned previously that I do actually have a really good quality blade for a Mainz type Gladius made by Paul Binns, my friend and excellent sword maker. And I've never got around to hilting it. I wasn't going to do it myself, I was going to commission someone else to do it, but I've just never got around to doing that. And so I have actually owned a Gladius blade for quite a while, but not the complete object, and I'd feel a bit stupid talking about a Gladius and just holding the blade by the tang. So anyway, I've got the Dynasty Forge one here, and this isn't a review as such, but I was just going to say a few things about it. So those of you who watched my unboxing video of the last set of Dynasty Forge weapons might remember that I commented on the looseness of the hilt of this. Now, funnily enough, when I was preparing, I've had this for quite a while, and because the hilt was loose, I kind of thought, I don't like that, and I put it to one side. But because I wanted to do a video talking about the Gladius, I picked it up and I started messing around with it, and I discovered something quite curious. So Dynasty Forge secure their blades via a threaded tang at the end, and that's a nut, and all of their swords currently, they are looking at other methods of securing them based on my feedback, but that is a nut currently, and all of their swords are secured with a very similar nut at the end that could look like the peened end of a tang. It doesn't really because it's brass, but it's, you know, it's not historically offensive, shall we say. And essentially I kind of thought that it's quite difficult to tighten that up because it's round. You can grip it with pliers, but then you damage it and you leave sort of scarring on the nut and stuff like this. If you make it shaped like a nut, then it would look really unsightly. So it's a problematic thing with modern made swords that are supposed to look historical. But I discovered something about this Gladius which I hadn't noticed previously, and which I can now, obviously when I do the full review, mention, and that is that the entire pommel, so you would think that this is one block of wood, although maybe not when you look at the grain of the wood, because you can see it's actually separate. The entire pommel, I can't do it now, is split into two halves. I've done it up so tight that I can't do it, there we go. But essentially that is a top half and a bottom half, and there's a sort of I suppose a decorative strip around here, brass strip, which actually hides the join between the two. And I did this up really, really tight, and as a result, the thing is now absolutely rock solid. So when I don't know if you can hear that. It's this rattly scabbard. I had problems with that rattly scabbard in the video as well. It sounds quite solid now that I've done it up really, really tight. And I've got to say, now that I've sorted out the hilt problem, it's really, really solid and really quite a nice thing. Now, my view is that it's a little bit on the overweight side, which I would say is true of their arming sword, the Knight, that I've got as well. They're not much, but they're a little bit, they don't have enough distal taper, basically. That being said, the Gladius isn't necessarily a light sword. I mean, they vary quite a bit between examples, but it is, although it's not big, you know, it's a sort of short sword, I suppose, although it's not that short. It has got quite a bit of beef to it. It is quite hefty. So really to say that yes, now that I've sorted out the hilt tightening problem, this is going up in my estimation. That being said, definitely the strong point of this is the blade, and the weak point is the hilt. As you will see, the grip in particular is too long. They need to shorten that grip by about half an inch or a centimetre, I would say. At the moment the grip is too long for this type of sword, and perhaps the proportions are not quite right on it. I think it would just look a lot better just with a shorter grip actually, and therefore also the spacers for the fingers down here need to be sort of compressed, as it were, into a smaller space. I don't have small hands, and as you can see, I can grip almost the entire grip and leave a whole section of that behind. Really, your hand wants to lock in against that pommel. You don't want to be playing around with that much grip on a sword like this and of this size. But what I will say overall is that this is nevertheless useful for my videos because it's illustrative of the Gladius next to other swords. It's roughly equivalent, you know, so it gives you a rough idea of what a Gladius looks like next to other types of swords. It's essentially an artist's model, and I can do some test cutting with it, I'm sure, at some point. But also to say that the Gladius as an object, so something occurred to me actually while I was filming that other video, that I was looking at this and I was thinking, this is probably what you would say is an officer's quality Gladius if this was a historical one. With the degree of decoration on the hilt scabbard fittings, that's probably the sort of Gladius that an officer would have. But what I was thinking while I was filming it was, I was thinking, okay, like a typical Roman soldier, the Roman army for the standards of the day was huge, and vast numbers of people from across the Roman Empire and even from outside the Roman Empire joined the Roman army, and they were equipped, obviously, by the state, by Rome. And I was just thinking, it must have been quite an incredible thing if you came from some, you know, back and beyond tribe in, you know, Germany or Britannia or Spain or Turkey or wherever, and you became a Roman soldier. You know, you ate, drank and slept that life, but you're, in a sense, although it was a hard life, you know, they marched vast distances and it was very regulated and regimented and all this kind of stuff, but actually they were kind of taken care of as well. They were fed, they were medically looked after, they were well looked after, housed essentially. They got to travel and see the world, as it were, and kill it. And but they got equipped with things like this, which if you're from some, you know, tiny village in North Africa or what's now Eastern Europe or wherever, you know, or Britannia or Gaul or wherever, and you're equipped with this kind of stuff, you never would have got your hands on this kind of stuff. I mean, imagine the armour they were wearing, you know, whether it's Lorica Hamata or Segmentata, whatever period and area and type of soldier you are, the armour and the weapons and even just the clothes and the shoes and obviously the food and the utensils and the tools that they got would have been a little bit mind-blowing, I think, actually, to a lot of people who joined the army. And you know, there's a lot of parallels. A lot of people say in the Victorian, Georgian and Victorian eras, 18th and 19th centuries, that people joined the military because, you know, they'd get a meal every day, a roof over their heads and clothes and shoes, you know. And there's a lot to be said for that. And I think in the modern day and age, when most people can have all of those things, you know, at least in the Western world, most of us have regular food and a roof, and we're not usually cold on a daily basis, and we don't have to do back-breaking work. I think it's quite difficult to relate to that, but this sort of, I was just looking at this object and thinking how this represents the civilized world in that era, in the Roman era, that this is something, this is an object that a normal person living in the world at that time just wouldn't get their hands on unless they became a soldier of Rome. So something to think about. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching. Gladiuses are really, really cool things. I will be talking a lot more about them. I need to get myself a Roman scutum shield, really, because as you'll see in the video I've done for the public channel, this goes together with a scutum and really isn't an object that exists by itself, contextless, you know, without a scutum. This absolutely is part of a equipment set, and the scutum is an what do you call it, kind of inextricable part of that weapon set. You can't really consider the Gladius by itself without considering the shield as well. Anyway, cheers for watching. See you again soon, a little bit later in the month for the next video, and see you on the public channel as well. Cheers, folks.